Well, welcome back to another episode of Coffee Table Theology from us here at Pure 24/7 Radio. And as always, you're with me, your host, Gareth Higgs, and I'm joined today by another friend of the show, the Reverend Tom Morgan. Tom, it's good to have you with us.
Thanks, Gareth. Great to be back.
Just to remind us and our listeners what it is you do and how do you spend your time?
So I'm an Anglican minister and I lead a church called the Light Church, which meets in Royal Warton Bassett, which is sort of North Wiltshire. Swindon's probably the nearest place nearby that many people would have heard of. And we launched on Easter Sunday, so we're still pretty new.
Yeah, sure. So actually, when we last had you on, we'd recorded a conversation where you had just launched. I think the church was a week old, or
Yeah.
one day old even. So tell us how things are going since then. People will be keen to know.
Yeah, great. No, really, really encouraging. We love seeing people come and check out church for the first time, people that have not been in church maybe for a very long time. A few people come in to check us out for whom thinking about faith is a brand new thing. And yeah, with like many places in the country, we see the sort of signs of the quiet revival. Doesn't always like show itself in people deciding that they're gonna give their lives to the Lord at the
Yep.
moment, but definitely like an increased curiosity around faith, what that can mean for people. So really encouraging time to plant a church, actually.
Yeah, great. And so if there are any listeners that happen to live in rural Wharton Bassett and aren't attached to a church, where are you based?
So if you're not attached to a church already, we meet at St Bart's Primary School in Royal Warton Bassett on Sundays and in various places during the week. So we run a monthly worship night in Lynham, which is just down the road from Royal Warton Bassett. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Oh, it's good to hear that things are going well and moving along nicely. So we're going to talk about Jesus today, which is a great. He is a great person to talk about, and someone that you and I could spend a long time talking about, I think. So we're just going to talk more about who Jesus is, what his work means for us, what his character and nature means for us today. That's the kind of purpose of today's conversation. And so, I mean, I know a little bit about you, but for our listeners' sake, when would you say did you first become aware of Jesus, or perhaps when did you first encounter Jesus?
Well, I can't say when I first became aware of him because I can never remember a point in my life where I was not aware of Jesus.
Mm.
I do remember several occasions as a small boy, age 4 or 5, giving my life to the Lord. I think because I learned that if I said I'd given my life to Jesus, I didn't have to go to bed. So I tried it as a tactic to avoid having to go to bed.
Mm.
After a while, people just sent you back up to bed, remembering that you gave your life to the Lord the week before. But also those were serious, you know.
Yeah.
So I never remember a time of not knowing that Jesus was there, that he died for me, that he offers eternal life to those who put their faith and trust in him.
Okay. And what does Jesus mean to you today? I mean, what? So it's a long time, a long time since you were a small boy. What? How's?
Well, you asked me this question in advance of us recording,
Mm.
and I really stumble over this, not because I can't think of things to say, but because the answer seems to get bigger and bigger every
Mm.
year.
Mm.
I don't really, I guess like everything, Jesus means everything to me.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think there's kind of a phrase in the in the kind of history of the church, which talks about Jesus as our magnificent obsession, and I've just been reminded of that recently. But you're right. There's the fact that he is the sole focus of our lives. But every description that we come up with about Jesus will always be imperfect and will all fall short, won't they? Because
Yeah.
they'll not
We,
match
we
his magnificence.
we read in scripture that in him all things hold together.
Yeah.
So the more that I have known of Jesus over the years, the more I find it impossible to see how anything possibly ever could work without him.
Mm.
Because he's a personal God, the God
Mm.
that I know, that I meet in prayer and as I read the scriptures, but he's also the King of the universe,
Yeah.
who was there right at the beginning of time.
Yeah.
He's like the biggest thing I can imagine, and also just so close by.
Yeah. Wow. No, it's a great description of the kind of paradox and all the kind of healthy tension that there is in how we view and relate to Jesus. So no, thanks for that. So we're thinking, today about sort of two things about the kind of uniqueness of Jesus, but then, well, we'll start first is the kind of lordship of Jesus, and we see, from the earliest Christian confessions that Christian people have always referred to Jesus as Lord. What do you think that meant historically, first of all, before we think about us today? What did it mean for the early disciples to talk about Jesus as Lord?
When I'm talking to people who are brand new to faith today, I
Mm.
often substitute the word Jesus for Lord for boss, the word Lord for boss,
Yeah, yeah.
and I use the two interchangeably. Actually, it's not a perfect translation um, because we choose the lordship of Jesus, actually.
Mm,
He is the master over all things. He is the
mm,
Lord of the universe, but we choose his lordship. But if he's the Lord, it means he's in authority over me. And because I've chosen for him to be my Lord, I've chosen to recognize that all authority is his. And so that means he gets to direct my life.
mm.
I have to choose whether I listen to that direction, of
Yeah,
course. That's the battle. But as the Lord, he gets to decide what is right and wrong because he made the whole thing. So he sets the standard. And when I've chosen to be a follower of his, that means that he gets to say where I go, what I do, what my career is, how I spend my money, how I spend my
mm,
time. I'm not claiming I follow all those instructions perfectly. I clearly
mm.
don't. But he's the boss.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting. Can I just push back on the chosen bit? I think I get what you mean, but I wonder actually whether Jesus is Lord of our lives still, even if we haven't chosen him to be there. Is that not the claim of the Christian faith? Isn't that actually we're accountable to Jesus, and we're going to appear before him one day, whether we have actually chosen to live under his lordship or not. So I don't know whether that's a fair critique. I think I got what you meant and agree
I
with you.
agree with the statements you've made. I think it just depends on what we mean by the word Lord, really, or
Yeah.
whether I'm translating the word Lord to mean my Lord
Yeah. Okay.
as opposed to the Lord. Well, both those things are true,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, because he is the judge. That's like another one of his magnificent characteristics.
Yeah.
The right to judge is his. The Father has given him that right to judge the universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one reason why we shouldn't judge, not because judgment isn't sometimes a good thing. Like we need judgment,
Mm.
but judgment is a God characteristic. It's not a human characteristic. So God gets to judge,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Sure.
he's given that to Jesus.
Yeah. Fine. No, thanks for that. I mean, I was just thinking in preparation for today, that of what it means to call Jesus Lord, and reminding of the conversation that Peter had with him, well, the other disciples too. And Jesus said, "Who do you think I am?" And they sort of reply, "Well, some people think this and this and this." And Jesus says, "Okay, well, that's nice, but what about you? What who do you say I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Christ, or you are the Messiah." In other words, he kind of confesses the magnificence of who Jesus is, as well as the personality of the sort of personalness of Jesus too. So I think that's really helpful. And then there are consequences of that, and immediately Jesus talks about the cost of discipleship straight after. And so I've always thought, I'm sort of thinking about Mark 8, but it's replicated in Matthew and Luke too. But I've always thought that there's a deliberate, whether Jesus said those two things right after the other, he may have done. Whether Mark put them together to make a point, he may have done. It doesn't matter to me. They're both still true. That as soon as you confess the truth about who Jesus is, that he's Lord and Master, not just of the universe, but of your life, there are consequences to that. There is a cost because it means putting him first. He is the boss of everything. Any thoughts, comments on that?
Agree.
Yeah, yeah, fine. That's a very wise response.
No, but I mean, it's true that if you decide that you're going to follow Jesus, we live in our existence is such that there's an unseen realm,
Mm,
and we have to be careful that we don't like give that undue amount of attention. But there is a spiritual battle,
mm,
and Jesus is not the only person who's trying to attract people to his lordship within the spiritual world.
mm.
There is an enemy who would love us to live in subordination to him as well.
Yeah, sure. No, sure. So what about, you talked about how you'd explain the kind of lordship of Jesus to other people, but what about for you practically? And I hear you said earlier on that you don't always get that right or don't always choose to obey, but what does it mean for you to live under the lordship of Jesus day by day?
Well, here's a good measure of it, which I wouldn't want you to actually be able to do this to me, but theoretically, I do think about it sometimes. Where our treasure is, there our heart is also.
Mm,
So a good way for me to examine how much of my life Jesus is Lord of is to look at my bank account and
mm,
think, if somebody else looked at this, if I gave them my bank statements, would they be able to see that my priority is following Jesus?
mm,
Because where your treasure is, there your heart is also.
yeah.
So that's one way in which if the lordship of Jesus affects me. Like,
Mm,
if he's the Lord of everything, my bank account should reflect that.
okay.
That following him is a high priority. What else? Well, it means that we have to keep a short account with other people. Because Jesus has told us to forgive others in order
Mm,
to be forgiven. I don't always want to keep a short account with people. Sometimes I would quite like to hold on to a grudge and just mutter away to myself about what they deserve and they've got this and that coming to them. But living under the lordship of Jesus means I have to try and keep a short account with people
mm,
and to forgive as I too wish to be forgiven. It affects your relationship status. It affects your friendships. It affects all of those things.
mm,
Jesus is the one that gets to make decisions or
mm.
gives us principles, and we make the decisions under the auspices of the principles he set out for us.
Yeah, sure. All of these, I think that's a really helpful response. And so often, you're absolutely right that our love for something is tested in our actions. In the New Testament, the word love is an active, it's a verb, it's a doing word. You have to put it into practice for it to be real. I completely get that. Is there any? But when we talked about what it means for you to live under the lordship of Jesus, you gave those practical examples. Is there a kind of almost like a personal, a devotional angle to it as well? Because otherwise, somebody could do the practices and say, "Oh, I'm trying to live under the lordship of Jesus," but you know, they may not have perhaps accepted him as Lord and Savior of the world, or even chosen to believe that he's those things. I mean, where's the tension between sort of devotion and action when it comes to Jesus' lordship? Do you think?
I don't think that they're separable. I think devotion without any
Mm,
action at all would suggest that there's actually no devotion there. I
mm,
mean, so if you're in a relationship with somebody and you are wholeheartedly devoted to them, you talk about your devotion to them all the time, you tell them how much you love them, you spend time with them, but you go off and cheat and you spend your money on other women or whatever, it would
mm.
suggest that actually you're not devoted,
Yeah,
that,
sure.
that the devotion is no devotion at all.
Mm,
Now, of course, we don't want to be legalistic about this, and that I think there is a tension there around not being legalistic,
mm,
but devotion with no action is no devotion at all.
mm,
It's just words.
What about actions with no devotions? Or is that impossible?
Um, yeah, so I think partly this depends upon different people's personalities.
Sure, sure.
So people show love in different kinds of ways, and that's the same in human to human
Mm,
relationships. We express our love in different ways. Some of us are good with words, some of us are good with actions. So there's an element of our own personalities within this.
mm,
Um, uh, I often think to myself about worship as giving something valuable.
mm,
I'm not really sure that it's worship in its purest form when I'm singing a load of songs I already really like to the
mm,
Lord.
mm.
I mean, I don't mean that worship should be a form of self-harm. It definitely shouldn't. It can be enjoyable,
Yeah,
but worship it's actually far more worship to God when I make a decision to do
sure.
something difficult than it is to sing some songs that I already like. It's
Mm,
not giving anything of any value if it's
yeah.
stuff I already like. So, I'm not really sure that's an answer to your question, but that's
No,
a
no,
random.
no. It's helpful, and I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm not trying to be difficult. I think that I'm just thinking on my feet really about people perhaps who may well have um, uh, claimed that Jesus was Lord of their lives. I'm just thinking about people I've met over the course of my life, really. They may well have claimed that Jesus was Lord of their lives, and there may have been a degree of activity to support that notion. But actually, it felt a bit more like outward duty rather than inward devotion. But I think you're right. I mean, it's a continuum, isn't it? And those things will kind of vary and look different depending on who we are and how
Yeah,
we're
and also, of
laid
course,
out.
it's about where we are on a sort of journey of maturity of
Yeah,
faith.
indeed.
Um, so I know I've got some wonderful friends for whom a lot of this stuff's up and down
Mm,
over time,
mm,
but the overall trajectory is walking towards Jesus over
yeah,
time.
sure, sure.
And it takes, I grew up with good Christian role models around me. If you've grown
Mm,
up with no good Christian role models around
yeah,
you, it takes a long time to learn to
sure.
walk in the ways of the Lord. And you just keep walking and you keep walking and you keep walking.
Mm. When you talk about Christian, strong Christian role models as you were growing up, are you thinking of myself there? Or
What listeners won't know is that Gareth and I have known each other since year 8 at school,
yeah,
when we sat by each other in maths. I
about
can't claim
30
that
years ago
Gareth,
now. Yeah,
yeah, no, it's a long time ago. I can't claim that Gareth was one of my good Christian role models in those days, although
no.
of course that's changed now.
It was the other way around, actually. I was just saying to some folk at church last night, they about you. I didn't name you, but described you. That you both spoke and acted for Jesus Christ in the purview of my life, and it had a significant impact in bringing me to the point of accepting and choosing, to use your language, Jesus to be Lord over my life. So
That's very kind of you to say, but my memories of that period are rather a lot more messing around than what you're going to.
yeah, yeah. Well, there we are. There we are. Just before we break, we'll break in a moment for some music. But I just wonder, what it means. You're a pastor of a church, and I know it's a fledgling church, but it sounds like it's growing and building momentum, and trying to reach out with the hope and love of the gospel, which is great. What do you think it means then, as a kind of pastor, a church leader, a vicar? What does it mean for Jesus to be Lord of your church? I'm thinking local church rather than the church, but what does it mean to live under the lordship of Jesus as a pastor, as a congregation?
Do you know, I've just been wrestling with this today
Mm,
and
okay.
wrestling with the words in Corinthians about good order.
Mm,
Um, uh, and what's the line for me between between encouraging the work of the Spirit,
yeah,
and also not in a different spirit, in the same spirit, ensuring good order.
yeah, yeah,
Um, both actually require the lordship of Jesus.
yeah. Sure.
Both, definitely. It requires praying. It
Mm,
requires trying to listen. It
mm,
requires trying to follow. It
mm,
requires believing that it doesn't all rest on me and my shoulders or the
mm,
shoulders of the leadership team, because the church belongs to Jesus Christ. It does not belong to me. And the moment I begin to think that it all belongs to me, even if I'm doing it from a servant heart, actually, but success or failure, whatever those words even mean, not very helpful
mm,
sometimes. But if I believe that belongs to me, then I've sat under something that is not the lordship of Jesus.
sure.
Uh, some of your question also tips into what's the difference between faith and wisdom,
Yeah.
and actually, faith and wisdom are both gifts of God.
Mm, mm,
I've seen churches that have planned their budgets with great faith
mm,
and seen the Lord really come through for them, and I've seen the churches that have planned their budgets with great faith, and it's resulted in having to make redundancies because they
yeah.
spent money they didn't have. Um, and so I don't really have a really tidy answer other than that. The church belongs to Jesus Christ.
Mm,
Sitting under his
mm,
lordship means it belongs to him, that neither success is ours or failure is ours. We
mm,
just have to try and be responsible with what God has given us
mm.
and trust that the rest is in his hands. And yeah, that's my thoughts off the top of my head.
No, some good thoughts. Some good thoughts. We're going to just take a break from our conversation now, and we'll hear some lovely music that is brought to you from us here at Pure 24/7 Radio. We'll be back in just a moment. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the little musical interlude there. This is Coffee Table Theology. This week I'm joined by a friend of the show, the Reverend Tom Morgan, who's a pastor of a church up in North Wiltshire. Tom, it's great to have you with us. We're talking today about the lordship of Jesus and what that means both for us personally and for kind of Christian community. And we've had a good conversation so far. Just thinking, just kind of extending that further, Tom, that kind of sense of Jesus' lordship. We began to kind of head this way at the beginning of the conversation, but Jesus is Lord over all things. He's Lord over all, over creation, over the universe, as well as our sort of individual lives. I mean, is there, how does that inspire you? Does that give you fear? I mean, when we talk about kind of, think about Jesus when he commissions the disciples at the end of Matthew's gospel, all authority in heaven and earth is mine, he says. I mean, what does that mean? How do you respond to that when you hear words like that?
Well, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Amen.
Um, but we also know the Lord,
Mm,
because the thing about being a Christian is we can know Jesus.
mm,
Um, he goes from being somebody that we can assent to intellectually to
mm.
being somebody that we can know. Now, of course, you have to. We don't ever know fully all of Jesus. There's a danger. Sometimes you see people come to faith and then sure that they're right on every topic because they
Yeah.
know Jesus, and I know him, so I must be right on this topic. So we do. We do that with humility, but we can know Jesus,
Mm,
and the more that we know of him and experience of him, my experience at least is that our sense of his holiness and his otherness grows,
mm,
but a sense of a sort of fear within me. Well, I guess the fear is like deep respect
mm,
and a
mm,
sense of his great power, but I'm
mm.
not terrified of him,
No,
not
no,
at all.
no, no. I mean, I love C.S. Lewis's words and his beautiful depiction of Christ in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and well, all the Narnia books actually, but particularly that one where he pictures Jesus, doesn't he, as this great, huge beast of a lion that is powerful, muscular, and with this huge kind of golden mane and huge teeth, and just like any sort of lion in Longleat, or on the sub-Saharan plains, sorry, you would you would quite rightly fear a beast like that as a human being, but in Lewis says, doesn't he? He's not a tame lion, but he's good.
Yeah,
And I love the way the Narnia movies have depicted Aslan, because he has all that might and strength, but his eyes. I think I've said this on a previous show before. His eyes are so gentle and warm and loving and encouraging. And there's a couple of wonderful stills from the film where this little child is looking up at this huge beast, but the eyes are full of love and wonder. And so I find that one of the most helpful images I have of holding in tension the closeness of Jesus and the friendliness of Jesus, and I mean that with thankfulness, not as a dismissive thing, and then the awesome nature of Jesus, the Lord of all glory, to whom we must one day bow in confession, and the one before every knee will one day bow, the scriptures tell us. But do you think then where does I have heard people talk to me before about the lordship of Jesus, and people perhaps that are seeking to have faith and or seeking to become Christians, are on the journey to, have said, well, I just feel that I don't want to be under domination, and Jesus, if Jesus is Lord, does that mean he controls me? And how would you reassure people that have those fears, perhaps, of how they might relate to Jesus and his lordship?
I have a couple of responses to that.
Mm,
One of which, it might not actually be the first thing I said if I was chatting to somebody, but um, they have actually grasped something if they realise that Jesus is the
mm,
master, the boss, and
mm,
that they are no longer sat on the throne of their life, but he is
mm,
sat on the throne of their life.
yeah.
So it depends where you think that question's coming from, because sometimes it's actually about control.
Mm,
Sometimes it's because people have experienced
mm,
really unhealthy control by other people in the past,
indeed.
and we've got to be sensitive to that.
Yeah.
I think like the answer is actually found just in reading the Gospels, and not really in one place, but just reading the Gospels, seeing the character of Jesus. Jesus who says, "Come and follow me,"
Mm,
but never says to anybody, "You must follow me now."
yeah.
He says,
Thank you.
"Come and follow me." There's an invitation to come and follow him, and that is the way of Jesus actually until he comes back. For
Yeah.
the most part, I mean, occasionally we read of or encounter people who've had a profound experience of Jesus that's left them
Mm,
thinking, "I don't think I've got any choice other than to follow you."
yeah.
Like the dream or the vision I had is so vivid.
Yeah.
But for most of us, most of the time, it's just the gentle invitation of Jesus to come and
Mm,
follow him.
mm,
Of course, there will be a day when every knee bows and every tongue confesses
yeah.
that Jesus Christ is Lord. That
Yeah.
day is coming. But
Mm,
but until that day comes, it's a gentle invitation and the voice
mm,
of Jesus saying, "Come and follow me."
mm. No, thank you. That's really, really helpful to hear. Um,
And I
well,
just think as well when we say that about Peter's denial of Jesus,
mm,
Jesus' restoration of him,
mm,
and the way that Jesus relates to Peter, who like he stepped outside the lordship of Jesus. Actually,
yeah.
he said, "I'm following you," and then did the thing he said he wasn't going to do.
Mm,
Jesus restores him, and
mm,
that's what I mean about sort of as you read the Gospels. That's one example of
yeah.
what Jesus' lordship looks like.
Yeah.
But read the Gospels, look at the way that Jesus interacts with those people who were calling him.
Yeah.
I mean, they might not have been calling him Lord originally at the beginning, but they were saying, "Yes, we're following you." Look at the way he relates to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. I was just as you were speaking, thinking of, those contrasts which are written all the way through the accounts of Jesus' life. So, on one, in one aspect, you've got Jesus speaking to the waves, and he's the master of the storms. He's and he just a word, and the climate changes, that's and the disciples are in the boat and they freak out. They're like, who is this? Who on earth is this? Like, what have we got here? A completely right response. And then you turn over a couple of pages and you find a little girl and Jesus is reaching out a gentle hand to lift her from her slumber, or a woman that's been ostracized because she's got a menstrual issue, and Jesus, she reaches out to touch Jesus' cloak, and Jesus notices, and she's you can tell in the story there's this tension. She's fearful that she's going to be rebuked by a Jewish rabbi, and she might have made him unclean, and Jesus deals with her with tenderness. He says, "You're my daughter," and he deliberately chooses to kind of juxtaposition between, well, whether he chooses to or not, there is a juxtaposition between the kind of might of Jesus and the not quite meekness, but the ability to be gentle and choose to allow people to respond to him gently. Yeah.
Gareth, do you remember when we were at school, we used to sing hymns in assembly,
I
which
do. Yeah,
one of them was Meekness and Majesty, a good old classic. It's just
it
what I thought.
was. Yeah, well,
That
there
line,
we are.
that
But
line sort of encompasses the
it's true.
like
Yeah.
two sides of the like both meek and majestic.
Indeed. Well, the '90s are now in vogue, Tom, as you'll know. So our fashion sense has eventually come round. So you at our church last week we sang "Shine, Jesus, Shine."
Yeah,
Is make a comeback. So maybe you should introduce meekness and majesty to the worship team in the next couple of weeks.
maybe.
It's appropriate for Advent, isn't it, as well? So
Yeah,
there
true.
you go. We're going to take a break now, folks, before I end up saying something that will get me into trouble. So we'll be back in a couple more minutes after some more songs. Well, welcome back to today's episode of Coffee Table Theology. We're talking today about the Lordship of Jesus with my friend and long-term friend and inspiration, the Reverend Tom Morgan, who's a church planter in the north of Wiltshire. We've been talking so far about the Lordship of Jesus, and that's been great to talk about that. But I'm just thinking about a little bit now, Tom, as we in the last few minutes, think about the uniqueness of Jesus. I mean, what makes Jesus so unique? First of all, what makes him different and distinctive?
Um, well, so many things. Here's a phrase that Jesus used that makes him unique. He said, I and the Father are one."
Mm, okay.
Jesus claimed to be God.
Yeah.
That sets him apart from all kinds of other people that have made claims to be wise. Jesus's claim, which I confess as a Christian, is that he is, was, is, will be God.
Mm, yeah. Sure. And I think, yeah, thank you for that. That is, I guess, the distinctive feature. I'm just thinking of how the first Christians were reflecting on that as well, and thinking about the uniqueness of Jesus. Of course, a lot of the New Testament writers are operating in what we call a polytheistic culture. So a culture in the Roman Empire where there were different gods for different things. So people wanted to get pregnant, they made an offering to a god. If they wanted a good harvest and good crop, they made an offering to another god. If they wanted to sort of peace in the family, they made an offering to another god. And if you wanted good weather, they made an offering to another god. That was kind of how people operated in a lot of the society in which the New Testament's written. And into that context, Luke has those wonderful words in Acts 4 that there is no other name under heaven by which people can be saved. So he's charting a really distinct course, that Jesus is the only saviour, and Jesus is, there's nobody like him, and nobody that comes close to him. And I guess that, as Jesus did say, I and the Father are one, he also self-identified as the way, the life, and the truth. And I wonder, what Jesus claims absolute truth, then the truth, not just some truth, but the truth. I mean, what's the significance or the implications of that for people today? Jesus claimed to absolute truth.
Well, we live in an age where many people don't really believe in an absolute truth.
Mm.
And Jesus insists actually that he is the way, the truth, and the life. Now, as Christians, we have to be careful that we don't take on some random political view and then claim Jesus says he is the truth. I'm a Christian, so my views must be the truth.
Yeah.
Jesus shapes us. We don't shape him. To try and think that we can shape Jesus is actually a heresy.
Yeah.
Jesus shapes us bit by bit. But he definitely claims that he is the truth. It's actually, you see it throughout the Gospels in other ways, in the ways that Jesus acts with authority. You can't read the works of Paul, the latter half of the New Testament, without seeing that there is this claim that it is Jesus, that he is it. He is not one of many gods. He is God. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as a kind of theologian, we might say that therefore Jesus is normative. In other words, he's the standard, he's the yardstick to which every other philosophy and political scheme must be tested. That actually the authenticity or the effectiveness, perhaps, of those things need to be compared to him. The real wisdom is found in Jesus. So if you think you've kind of got the answer or the solution from another place, then we actually need to test the claims of that and test the mechanism of that worldview against Jesus' outlook on life and the things Jesus said and the values that Jesus espoused and modelled and taught. And of course, he can claim that he is, as you said, he can claim he is absolute truth, the truth, because he is God. And so, he is the very creator of the universe. One of the first things you said on this call today, in our earlier conversation, was that there has never been a time when Jesus hasn't existed. He's always been there. In him all things hold together. The whole world was created by him, for him, and through him.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So there's a sense of his, therefore, that truth has always been. It's been a value. It's part of who God is, and it's at the very core of Jesus' identity as part of the Godhead.
Yeah.
And so therefore, everybody else is going to fail to match up.
Yeah, and it will drive people wild.
Yeah.
Like it's done it since the time of Jesus, and ever since it will drive people wild. The claim that Jesus is the truth. I mean, when Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," there were people that wanted to take him out and stone him to death for blasphemy. And they said, "Because you, a mere man, claim to be God." That's in John 10. This claim of Jesus, which brought hope to people all around him, which brought truth and light to people around him, it also drove many people around him absolutely wild. I had a really interesting chat at church a few weeks ago with some local churchgoers who came to visit us. Didn't have a service that week, and we were looking at Jesus's claim that week where he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." I said, "Oh, we don't like that at all. It's not very inclusive. How can you talk? How can you talk about that?" I'm like, "Well, on one hand, it maybe isn't that inclusive because Jesus is saying, I'm it."
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's an invitation that's open to absolutely everybody.
That's right.
The invitation to faith is open to absolutely everyone. And again, like the gospel shapes us, we don't shape the gospel. So all of us, we all come with our own expectations based on how we're raised to the gospel, and we try and read everything through the light of what we think is right and wrong. But that is like the gospel should shape us. The gospel should shape my mind bit by bit. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what a wonderful place to end with the fact that Jesus is the truth. He is unique. There's nobody like him, and so there is an exclusivity there that is, unashamedly we believe that. But there's also a wide grasp. That Jesus stretches his arms wide on the cross, doesn't he? And that that includes everybody, or everybody who wants to respond is welcome to do so, and there's a place for each of them. Yeah. Tom, it's been great to talk to you today, and I've really appreciated your time. We wish you God's richest blessing as you continue to plant and in North Wiltshire. We pray God's blessing upon the Light Church, that it might grow and flourish and continue to be Christ-honouring in all that it seeks to do. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
The November edition of Pure Media, the magazine, will be perfectly formed for you from Friday the 7th of November. We sit down and have a chat with Becca Legg from Restored and delve deeper into the life and work of John Childress from Free Recovery. Pure Media, the magazine, is the magazine to get yourself if you like a comfy coffee and a chat with a friend. Or tea, we won't judge. In our latest magazine, we introduce you to a new writer, Andy Robb, as well as your favourites, including Isla Rouse, Richard Scott, Karen Ferguson, and more. Sign up now so you never miss out on this amazing monthly magazine, handcrafted by real people for real people just like you. Pure Media, the magazine, is always on point and in print. Find out more at www.puremediathemagazine.com.